Luke Korem, you directed the documentary Milli Vanilli about the infamous sort of music duo who turned out to be lip syncing their music. But of course, there was more to their story and more people involved in their story than meets the eye. What got you interested in this story?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm a child of the '90s, and Milli Vanilli is, something that has made an indelible mark on pop culture. And I remember the VH1 Behind the Music episode, of course. And I remember one night I just kind of went down a rabbit hole looking at Milli Vanilli, and I saw this video of Fab Morvan at the Moth sharing his story. And then at the end, he sang, and he had this beautiful voice. And I thought, wait a minute, I thought these guys were like talentless hacks. Like, why would you ever agree to do this? And that just led me down this path where I came to find out that most of us know the headline of Milli Vanilli, but very few of us actually know the story. Most people want to laugh at these guys and make them out to be a joke and not think about the fact that they were part of this giant machine that sold this lie. And so I really wanted to dive into that and also show the human side of these two guys who were just, early 20s when this whole thing happened.
And how did you end up connecting with Fab Morvan and getting to tell his story in this film?
It took me a year. I kept writing to him because he's had a lot of people reach out to him, and I was very persistent. And eventually, he agreed to meet with me, and we had a couple meetings. And it came down to a trust factor. I told him, "Look, I want to tell an objective portrait, so I'm gonna bring everybody in and ask them for their side of the story, and I need you to be comfortable with that." Of course, he's the spine of it, but there are conflicting narratives in this story. And ultimately, he just said, I see that you want to tell the full story and the truth. And he went along with it and agreed.
And how do you balance sort of this kind of story where there are conflicting narratives and sort of different points of view about what happened, how they happened? What's that process like as a director?
Well, we did a lot of, investigating into it. But some things that there are no record of, you ultimately have to let the camera show the audience. The camera doesn't lie. And I think that audiences, when they watch, they hear different sides of the story. For instance, did Rob and Fab knowingly go along with this from the beginning, or were they kind of tricked into it? That is debatable. We have people say that the Grammys were paid to allow Rob and Fab to lip sync. People who are very at the center of this. And what we did is we allowed people to share their side. And I think that the audience appreciates that. They appreciate when you don't force one side. And I had no horse in the race. I just wanted to tell a well-rounded portrait.
And with Rob having passed away quite some time ago, like how difficult was it to get his perspective into the film and really make him a part of it too?
Yeah, that was paramount. Absolutely. And we were very fortunate. We tracked down some audio. He did an interview about 30 days before he died. And he was in a drug rehab clinic, completely sober, and did this interview in which he spoke candidly about his life. And that became our way, and including to all the archive that we discovered, that became our way to bring his voice alive and his spirit alive in the film. And you really get to hear his side of it. So it's a dual story of Rob and Fab. And without that, the film would not be what it is.
And having, being a child of the 90s, as you said, being young when this scandal was taking place, I'm sort of around the same age. So I was also, picking this up in sort of the background radiation of pop culture. What surprised you about it coming to this story now, investigating it as an adult and a filmmaker?
I think the way the media handled it, when you look back at it, there's two guys who barely speak English, who at the end, when the scandal erupted, the media only went after them. When there's this entire machine, Arista Records, run by the Clive Davis, right? They were not just a one-hit wonder. They were the number one or two act for Arista Records that year. They sold 30 million singles, 10 million albums. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, which the label themselves took. And yet, when everything fell apart, no one cared about those people. Everyone just said, no, it's these two guys that are ultimately responsible, which they're culpable, but in no way are they the only ones. They did not even come up with the idea. There's a producer behind this who had done this before with another band. And so that blew my mind. I'm like, wait a minute. So all those people we don't remember in history. We just remember Rob and Fab.
And has working on this affected the way you look at pop music in general, the way you look at, you know, contemporary pop music, and maybe who's behind that, and what the kind of inner workings are?
Well, I've always been interested in, how the sausage is made. As a filmmaker, you wanted to go behind the scenes of things. But, at the end of the day, pop music is entertainment. And we accept that more today, TikTok, etc. And that's what makes this story so absurd is at the time, and people literally were smashing their records. I mean, like these guys, like people were burning Milli Vanilli things. They were sued by people for class action lawsuits because people idolized them. It's preposterous. And so I've always known pop music. I think most people know that it is an illusion, and we accept it as such. But I think the deception that went involved with this, and the anger and vitriol that was involved, we've never seen, and I don't know if we ever will again.
And it's sort of, in the tradition of these portraits that we've seen in recent years of these scandalous figures who we're now learning to see in a more empathetic way, whether it's, Britney Spears, or, Pam Anderson and Tommy Lee, or the OJ trial, or anything like that, where do you feel like we've developed kind of a more savvy and also a little bit more empathy for what people go through who are in the public eye like this?
I would hope so. I mean, part of the challenge in making this film was to overcome people's bias, because a lot of people said, "Oh, I know that story," "Oh, those jokers," But a lot of people, when they watch this film, cry because then they're like, "I did not understand what was going on." And also, what makes these guys different is they didn't do a crime, they didn't commit a crime. Like what they did was agree eventually to lip sync, and someone handed them the keys to fame, and they said, "Okay, that's it." Right? So like there was no big crime here, yet one of them lost his life because of this. And I think, that's what makes this story, and that's what made it so difficult getting people to sit down with us. Clive Davis, refusing. The Grammys, who, like I said, we have people on record saying they were paid, and they were like, "We want nothing to do with Milli Vanilli." They wouldn't participate. Like people run from this story, not just because of the part it makes in pop culture, the mark it made, but because the person lost his life.
And being that this is a story that touches on so many touchy subjects and relationships in the industry, how difficult was it to get the people who did participate in the documentary to sit down with you?
Extremely difficult. Everybody who was involved with this had been hurt. The real singers, I really wanted them to be on. This guy Charles Shaw, for instance, who raps "Girl, You Know It's True," he was kicked to the curb, kicked out of the band after the first song. So what's wild is "Girl, You Know It's True" is rapped by one guy. He's put out of the band, and another rapper steps in and raps the rest of the album. And like no one even knows that, right? Like it's insane. And also the racial aspect of it. We worked a lot with our executive producer Hanif Abdurraqib on this to make sure we really nailed it. These were Black artists that were exploited mostly by white producers. And you can't deny that part of the story. And we wanted to make sure that was shown. There's blackface by Howard Stern. There's a sketch that he did when like these guys were just like torn to shreds, and everybody laughed and thought it was okay. So really, when I approached everybody who had been hurt by this, I just said, "Look, I want your side. That's it. I just want your side, and you tell me your truth." And people really respected that.
And did the music rights prove to be challenging, given that some of the subjects in the film control those rights?
I think producing this film was one of the most difficult things I've ever done, because the music master rights were owned by, I guess you could say, the villain in the film, Frank Farian, the producer. So he had to sign off and say it was okay for us to even make this film. And then Clive Davis, of course, head of Sony. So yes, the challenges were immense. We actually started making this film, and we were 8 or 9 months in without the music rights approved. I'm very thankful to our partners, MRC, who backed the film. They knew eventually I'd get them, but that in itself was quite the feat.
And you were nominated for International Documentary Association Award for Best Music Documentary. What was that recognition like, and what's it like to put all that hard work in and to see that kind of concrete recognition?
Yeah, it meant so much because, people hear Milli Vanilli and they just dismiss it, and to know that people saw it, especially like the IDA, I never would have dreamed we would have got an IDA, nomination. I just didn't think that they would that it would be their cup of tea, I guess you could say. But then they watched it and realized the art in it, you know, and the humanity in it. And this is a very visceral story. And, you know, just to see the way audiences have responded, those who watch it are just, you know, time and time again, we're hit up by people who said, I had no idea what I was getting into. You know, it's very fun, of course, but then it gets quite tragic as it goes on. And I'm just thankful that audiences have really resonated with the story.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on the film and the recognition it has received so far and may continue to receive, knock on wood there too. So thank you so much for talking with me, and we'll see you again in a little bit.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.